Decorating Center. Good morning to you on a Monday morning. I'm Art Lewis. Nice to have you with us. Later on, we'll be talking to State Representative Bill G. Schuette. After the 10 o'clock news at 11 o'clock, we'll look at the Saginaw Choral Society's upcoming program. But for this hour, we're going to spend time with a good friend who I always appreciate his commentary on the environment and things of that nature. Agree or disagree with him, he's well thought out in his positions and always interesting to talk to. And we say good morning to Peter Sinclair.
Hey, Art. It's great to be here again.
Good to have you here. I have a question for you. I've been saving this one up because we hear about it from time to time, and I thought I'd ask your opinion on this. It has been said that what it takes to mine materials for the new batteries and all the EVs of the world is so detrimental to the environment that it cancels out whatever benefits the EVs are providing. True or false, or where are we with it?
It's false. And I'll give you an example why. So in 2020, we mined 100,000 times as much coal as we did lithium. And the estimates are that even with an expanded electric vehicle industry and all that, that factor is still going to be like many thousands of times. But
let me ask you this, though, Peter.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are they going to cross each other at some point? Because here's what I asked that for. In the U.S., the use of coal for generating electricity is on the downswing, big time.
Sure.
Not so overseas, not so in China and other places where we still send a lot of coal. But we are going to eventually mine less coal, and with the advent of EVs, we're going to mine more lithium.
Yeah.
So is it going to cross at some point in time?
Yeah, no is the answer. First of all, we're just never going to need that much lithium, and then this is critical too. Coal is something you dig out of the ground, you burn it, and then now you got coal ash, and that's a waste product. Lithium, you can recycle, and so the biggest makers of lithium batteries, which for the moment are still in China, are saying that by 2040 they expect to be completely a circular process, just using recycled lithium. So, and that's true of a lot of these.
So we send all our coal to China so they can produce the energy needed to make the.
Well, we are sending a lot of coal to China, but you know they have deployed in the last year more solar panels than India, Europe, and the United States combined. So they are, they're burning too much coal, but they are moving rapidly because they see this as the next industrial revolution and they don't want to miss it.
All right, so let's take a look at this. I asked you this before we went on the air, too. I'm just going to use the last 20 years. It probably goes back farther than that. But in the last 20 years, we have publicized, talked about, discussed, cajoled about the environment and about saving the environment, reducing emissions, and all of those things. And I think it's fair to say the United States has done a reasonable job. Not perfect, but reasonable job. Certainly better than other countries in the world that are producing lots of emissions. Yet with all the talk, all the promotion, all the legislation, we just heard today the greenhouse gases go up. Why, with all of this and the world supposedly minding their P's and Q's, are we seeing a rise in greenhouse gases?
Well, we're seeing developing countries that are using more energy, and a lot of that comes from burning coal. It's important to understand that if we leveled off right now at the amount of fossil fuels that we're burning, we would still see CO2 levels in the atmosphere go up because we're just adding that much more every year. So what we've got to do is
sort of like the government debt. We had the deficit to the debt every year.
Well, it's a little like that, and at least as frightening. And so what we have to do is figure out ways to bring it down. Now, in the United States, we have actually been doing some good work in bringing down the amount of fossil fuel that we need to produce a given amount of GDP. So that's a good thing. And we are hoping that starts to spread, and there are encouraging signs in places like India and Pakistan and Africa and elsewhere that energies like solar and wind are coming on very strong.
In this country, there's been a push for those. And in Michigan, the state did something that a lot of people are not happy with in dictating to local government that they no longer have zoning control on these issues. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think it's a little interesting to people when I hear people say, "Oh, we want local control." Well, I don't know. For the last century, we haven't had local control of oil drilling, gas drilling, fracking, or gas pipelines. Well,
when you say we don't have local control, are you saying that a community could not have stopped someone from drilling?
That's correct. That's correct. It's all regulated at the state, and I talked to some officials at Eagle about this, but also to some local officials, township supervisors, and county commissioners in rural areas. You can have a certain amount of say, but you can't really stop it. If they want to bring, for instance, a gas pipeline through, you can
public interest kind of thing.
Yeah. It's called eminent domain.
Yep.
And there is no eminent domain for clean energy. That has to be something a farmer says, yeah, I would like that on my land, and I'll sign a contract, but I'm negotiating.
And it's a lot of money.
Paid. So it's the difference between saving the farm and maybe losing the farm for a lot of these guys. And their argument is, it's my private property. I need to diversify my income if I want to stay in business. If I can't stay in business, I got to sell. And then you've got a subdivision.
Of course, the other argument from other private property owners is, hey, we have to follow the zoning rules. We have to do this. We have to do that.
Well, I think that, zoning is fine, but if people move into an area that is primarily agriculturally zoned, then you should be prepared if somebody builds an elevator or a dryer across the road from you, or if they want to start up a hog operation next door.
Yeah.
And solar and wind are defined as agricultural operations. And so it's the farmer's choice would be my position.
All right, take a break. Come back. We're talking to Peter Sinclair, and we will have more with Peter when we return. We take a moment to tell you about McDonald Ford in Freeland, and right next to them, Quick Lane Freeland, which is a one-stop service center for all your automotive repair needs. For example, oil changes, brakes, batteries, tires. Oh, and speaking of tires, let me make this note to you. If you are looking for a set of tires, look no further than Quick Lane Freeland, because right now they are selling new tires for just $5 over cost. Can't do better than that. And these are not off-brands. These are brand names like Michelin, Goodyear, and BF Goodrich. Plus, a lot of tires have an additional $60 to $100 in rebates. There is extra for installation, including balancing and lifetime tire repairs. But you can enjoy their customer lounge with internet and free ice cream bars at Quick Lane Freeland, right next to McDonald Ford. And remember that Quick Lane Freeland works on all makes and models of cars to keep your car or truck in tip-top shape. Don't forget, $5 over cost for tires.
It could be the best years.
We're back with you, talking to Peter Sinclair about environmental issues and the like. So, Peter, let me ask, as you see it today, what's the leading environmental issue that needs the most attention?
Well, I think without a doubt, carbon emissions, in my mind, and I suspect if you took a survey of scientists out there, they would agree that our carbon emissions are the number one issue.
And how are we doing as a nation? Let's forget the rest of the world. We can't control them. So let's talk about what we can control.
Yeah, well, in the United States, carbon emissions have kind of leveled off, maybe even come down a little bit. We're burning more gas, which at least at the point of burning emits less carbon than coal. Although there are questions about what happens in the pipelines and everything on the way to the power plant, because there is a certain amount of leakage there, and there are problems with when these gas wells reach end of life. They're very expensive to cap them off, and sometimes these companies they go away and leave town, and we're left with these leaky, toxic wells. So there's a number of issues there, but solar is exploding. Wind is still continuing to expand smartly, and we're here in the Midwest. This is really. Some people call it the Saudi Arabia of clean energy, just because of the solar and wind resource that we have all across from the Rockies, here to the Midwest.
And we have companies providing the raw materials. So Hemlock Semiconductor is going to have a major expansion right across the street. Is Corning coming in?
That's right. A great example. Hemlock Semiconductor is a huge success story, and a big part of their business model is based on solar, supplying that market.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are other questions that go along with that, because they want to employ a couple hundred more employees. Corning is going to look for 1,100 employees. It's not finding the employees, although that is an issue to a degree. Housing them is an issue. We just haven't got the housing stock right around here that's affordable anymore, and it's $300 a square minimally to build a house, and people with 3% mortgages aren't selling their houses because they don't want to get a 7% mortgage on the next house. And we're in an interesting time right now.
Housing is a tremendous issue, and actually related to climate, because home insurance is something that is getting more and more expensive. And
especially if you live in places like Florida.
Well, that's right, but also across the Midwest, because the New York Times had kind of a terrifying article about this a few months ago. Home insurance is going up all over the country related. It's easy to understand: Florida, Louisiana, Texas, from storms, California, wildfires, but also across the Midwest from the kind of storms and flooding that we're having here that we have not had in the past. In particular, flooding in areas that didn't used to flood, and things like hailstorms. So in 18 states, home insurance companies are not making money, and that's up from about 5 states 10 years ago. Well, if you're not making money, you got to raise rates, and so we're seeing,
or they pull out,
and so that's happening some places.
And of course, when you pull out, then there are fewer competitors who can raise their rates.
It's California or Florida in particular is in a bit of a death spiral right now, and I don't know what the answer is for them.
Yeah. It's they've been hit storm after storm after storm. They no sooner get cleaned up on one and they get another one.
Well, and this is something that I think people haven't thought about very much in terms of the impacts of climate change, because we see these pictures of a forlorn polar bear on an ice floe, and we think, well, I feel bad for the bear, but what does that mean for me? Well, what it means for us is, well, if you've seen the pictures coming out of Asheville, North Carolina, over the last few months or a few weeks, those are postcards from the future.
But having said that, in 1986, for example, here, it was a 100-year storm. Well, if we have it now and it's a 100-year storm, doesn't the question then become, are we going to wait another 100 years to see another one? Or are we entering into a new phase where the 100-year storm becomes a 5-year storm?
That is exactly what is happening. That is exactly what is happening. So the storms that a century ago would have been, and when you say 100-year storm, it's a little misleading. It doesn't mean it happens every 100 years. It means the chances of that
But
happening.
it's used
in a
as
year.
a right. It's a descriptor.
And I think everybody recognizes that we're starting to see 100-year or 500-year or even 1,000-year storms. We're hearing about them on a pretty regular basis, and so like in Midland, where I live, we're going to be spending something like $50-60 million on flood control measures,
Right.
Largely federal and state money, based on 100-year storm. But so the question that I have been asking is, okay, 100-year storm as of like 1990, or 100-year storm as of like today, or as of like 2050, because it's going to change,
Yeah, and of course, and that was brought on not so. I mean, we've had flooding forever there. I mean, I
Sure.
live on the Tittabawassee on
Oh,
the
yeah.
high side, but flooded out every spring.
Of course.
They open the dams and the water flows. When the dams collapsed, that was a whole different story, and that really, drove it home, and it drove it to everybody's mindset. It became top of mind, which is why we see what we see going on in Midland now for ideas to reduce the impact of water on the communities. That's a good thing. I don't have any problem with that. I want to see that happen, so I don't
Sure.
see water. But it took those dam collapses to drive it home.
Well, yeah, and what's interesting, even like in 2020, before the dams collapsed, we had flooding in a number of neighborhoods.
We've always had we've had the flooding.
But we have in Midland in particular, we have some very, very what have historically been high-end neighborhoods that did not used to flood, and now they're flooding. And so some of these homes were like $1 million homes being sold for $300,000, and then the new buyer has to come in and elevate them, to meet the new code, right? And so anyway, you talk about housing. It's a critical need, and there's an intersection with climate change there, because the places that we used to build homes, we can't anymore.
Because of floodplain.
Because of floodplains. The floodplains that were floodplains in the 1950s, now there's areas that were not supposed to be floodplains, but are floodplains today. So a lot of people who thought they were high and dry and safe are really not anymore. And these are homes that if they start getting flooded on a semi-regular basis, then those values are going to go down. And that's a bad thing.
Yeah. All right, hang on. We'll be back. We're talking to Peter Sinclair, and we will be back with more after these notes.
Hi, Saginaw.
With you, talking to Peter Sinclair, who has been involved ever since I've known him in the environmental movement. And we were just talking off air. We have all these great conversations during the breaks, folks. But I put forth the notion that there are some environmentalists that maybe use language that they probably shouldn't. And I'm not talking about cursing, things like that. But it's totally 100% scare tactics, and it tends to turn people off rather than just sit down and have a conversation about it with facts and figures and knowledge. They just scare people, and I don't know that they're good for the movement.
I would agree. This high level scientists that I communicate with on a regular basis are kind of equally frustrated with what they call doomerism.
That's a good word, doomerism. I've not heard that before.
Doomers.
Yeah.
It's a cottage industry online. If you spend any time on YouTube, is all kinds of it's all over. We're doomed. There's nothing we can do. Well, there's a lot we can do. But we need to be heads up, and we do need to be clear-eyed that the problems that we face are extremely serious and are going to demand a lot. Either we do it proactively and avoid the problems, or the problems will come and then we'll be picking up the pieces.
Yet I go back to where I started this conversation. I mean, we've been talking about this for decades and decades and decades. We heard about the oceans. Well, first we heard about global warming, and then that name went away because we found we had cooling, and now we just have climate change. From your standpoint, what should it be called?
Well, that's kind of a misnomer that's out there. Oh, why did they change the name to climate change? Well, go back to 1990 when they started the United Nations unit that deals with this. They called it the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So yeah, it was global warming, but they also understood it was climate change. And so climate change encompasses a whole lot of things, because when you change the atmosphere faster than it has maybe ever changed in the history of the Earth, you get a whole lot of knock-on effects. And in some areas it's wetter, some areas it's drier. You're going to have, in some cases, more severe storms even in the winter. So it runs a whole gamut of effects.
So from your standpoint, and you've been at this a long time, your family's been involved in some of these issues for a long time, do you see progress?
I see progress. From my perspective, it's not coming quickly enough. I blame the fossil fuel industry, which has a massive campaign of misinformation that has been ongoing for 40 years, and it's left a lot of people confused about what's going on.
When you say misinformation, give us an example.
Well, let's see. Why the world's not warming? It's cooling. That would be some misinformation that was with us quite a while, for a few decades there. I think a lot of people have realized, no, that's wrong. We're not cooling. It's warming. So, there's a whole list of these things that I call the climate crocs. In fact, that was the name of a YouTube series that I started about 15 years ago that got a lot of attention. But golly, that storms aren't getting worse, or that the ice isn't really melting. Yeah, it's melting. Basically just it's like a Monty Python routine sometimes. It's like, well, the world is warming. No, it's not. It just goes round and round. But that's why I try to listen to the scientists who are most deeply immersed in studying and gathering data and publishing on this issue, to kind of keep myself straight and well briefed.
Have you had to change your mind over the years about some things?
Yeah, I think we change our mind mostly about, like, what's the best approach to these problems. I think 25 years ago, people said, for instance, that hydrogen, we're gonna go to a hydrogen economy and everything will be hydrogen. Well, and then all of a sudden batteries became really, really, really cheap, and so they recognized why would you use a whole bunch of electricity to make some hydrogen and then burn the hydrogen to make more electricity? Why not just store the electricity in a increasingly inexpensive battery and go that way?
The question is, what do you do with the batteries when they're done?
Well, you recycle them.
Now you do, or you start to.
Yeah, right. Sure.
But at the time, there wasn't a lot of that going on.
Right. Well,
And then we had the acids to deal with, and we had all the other things that were in the wet cells.
Well, okay, and I think we 30 years ago, these were not issues that we thought about, but it turns out that this is a very valuable waste stream. Now that there's starting to be enough of it to make a business model, now you have companies. There's a company called Redwood, started by some alumni from Tesla, that now has contracts with Ford and some of the big auto companies to recycle lithium batteries. And we are expecting that by 2040, almost a big portion, if not all, of our lithium supply is going to come from recycling batteries.
Take a break and be back one more time. We're talking to Peter Sinclair.
Mutual.
Back with you, and we're talking to Peter Sinclair, and we had a caller with a question, and it's funny because I was going to bring this up, at least the part of it. He would like your opinion on Dow Chemical working with X Energy to build a small modular nuclear reactor in Texas. What do you think of those?
Well, I wish everybody luck that's working on those projects. There are a number of companies that we had a lot of news in the last couple of weeks with Amazon and some of the other Google, some of the other big tech companies investing a lot of money in small modular nuclears, and it makes sense in their idea is to go to existing sites where there's already a power plant, or whether it's a coal or a nuclear, where you've already got the transmission lines and
the
infrastructure is there, and then you can drop 1 or 2 or 4 of these things in there is the idea. So the economic case is that they're small and they're modular, so we're going to make these on an assembly line, and so therefore that will drive the price down. But you only get that price break after you build a certain number of them, right? Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the rub. Who's going to pay the premium on those first 5 or 10 or 50 or 100 that you need to drive that
the Dows
price?
Of the world.
Well, the Dows of the world, maybe. And so we hope that maybe by the mid-2030s that we'll have several of those running. We'll see how they work, and that'll be a going thing.
I saved this to the end because I'm not amused would be the wrong word, but I'm certainly delighted in some ways. Your family's history with nuclear energy goes back to the Midland Nuclear Complex, and here we are today talking about modular nuclear, and you're not objecting to it. I caution people I just say, look,
history tells us that this is harder to do than what you might have thought. And
although with today's technology and everything, maybe it's a little easier than it used to be.
Maybe it's a little easier, but, just reframe it a little bit. Let's say I just invented this new thing. It's called a Boeing 747, and we're going
never get off the ground.
And we're gonna build them in a factory, and we're gonna stamp them out, and it's gonna be
Right.
Well, now you're talking about it took Boeing 100 years or 80 years to develop the supply chains and the engineering expertise and
Sure.
the infrastructure to put themselves in a position where they could begin to build 747s. And we're looking at something that is, arguably about the same scale, about the same complexity, and we're trying to get it off the ground in 5 or 10 years.
Well, the difference is if Boeing had the technology 100 years ago, it wouldn't have taken them 100 years to get where they are. Today we have the technology.
Yeah, but you still have global supply chains. You have
But there is issues.
You need a cadre of trained, experienced engineers and manufacturing people, to do these things. And so, it's not that it can't be done. It's just I just caution people.
Not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, because people say, well, why don't we just build nuclear? Well, it's hard. People have been working on this for 70 years.
It's easy, everybody be doing it. That's the old line, isn't it?
This is it.
So just out of curiosity and for fun, do you ever see us having a Midland nuclear plant again?
That site exists, and it's
it certainly has the infrastructure.
And it has the infrastructure. I would never say never.
Yeah.
I mean but we still have, there are still some issues out there that remain to be solved. But I'm generally a believer in technology, and if you put enough engineers on a problem, you can fix it.
Well, Peter, as always, it's always fun chatting with you.
You bet. Yeah.
We'll do her again.
Great fun. I hope so.
All right. Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
You bet.
Peter Sinclair, as we talk environment. We appreciate his time. As always, we're going to take a pause and be back, tell you what's ahead next hour.
Hello, I am
Joining us. Coming up next hour, we're going to talk to State Representative Bill G. Schuette. All of that is ahead here on the Art Lewis Show. Before we do that, though, bring you up to date on the world and the nation with news from CBS. And Michael Perch is in the WSGW newsroom. He's going to fill you in on what's happening in the region and here in the state of Michigan. So stick around. We'll be back with you right after the news here on WSGW to talk with Representative Bill G. Schuette. That's coming up next.
Broadcasting from the